everybody. Thank you for taking the time out to join. So welcome back to people who've attended one or both of the previous webinars, and a warm welcome to people who are joining one of the series for the first time. So I'm Richard Tulley. I'm currently Director of Program Project Management at Sopra Steria. I kind of run a program project management practice of around 530 or so project professionals across the breadth of our business. And my role in many ways is about developing people, which is something I'm very passionate about. And at the heart of that, for the last 5 years, from perspective of not just developing colleagues at Sopra Steria, but my own development, I've been heavily involved in mentoring inside and outside of my role. And this afternoon's discussion is really aimed at the mentees. So people who are in mentoring relationships or considering being mentored. It's really my experience and my insights about how you make the most of that and how you get the best out of your mentoring relationship. And so importantly, we're thinking about development really, and in the broad sense, and development is about change. And in the context of mentoring, I encourage, as the picture kind of illustrates, to think about your development as professional development and personal development, and give both of those factors an equal kind of weighting. And mentoring, I think you need to see at the heart of that. And as the orange dot kind of illustrates the position of that, my contention is that mentoring is more weighted towards your personal development, but it has very much resonance in terms of both professional and personal development. And ultimately, as we know through our project management kind of roles and our experience of delivering projects, change comes with action. So there's a vision around change, there's an appreciation of what the future might look like, but only with action does that change become our reality. And that's a theme for this afternoon. And the words at the bottom there really encapsulate the essence of mentoring from a mentee perspective for me. So purpose we'll talk about, that's critical. Your sense of direction, goals, your commitment to your own development and taking action, a positive mindset, taking ownership, and ultimately that keyword action that comes at the end of that thought process and that evaluation. So we're looking at a fairly broad spectrum of things to discuss this afternoon. So really what I hoped for was that people coming onto this call would get value whether or not they're existing mentees. So whether people are thinking about being mentored, and generally if people are just committed to their development and want to understand and explore a little bit more about how mentoring can help, and people who are just generally curious. And so what we're going to cover is a number of things. I'm going to start, because this really is the crux of the matter, I think, for making mentoring work for you, is your sense of purpose. I'll talk a little bit briefly about what mentoring is just for context, but that's a small part of the discussion. And I'd really like to explore the mentoring life cycle to help you contextualize what your mentoring experience should look like as you move through a passage of time. I'm going to emphasize what I consider the critical success factors to me. So what is it that makes a mentoring relationship successful? And then share a few thoughts about goals, reflection, and some things to think about as you progress through your mentoring journey. Well, I'm hoping I can deliver some insight this afternoon that's of value to everybody. I'll have to work probably hardest at that one person who's had quite a lot of experience. So, okay, so I'm going to move on, and I'm going to start by talking about purpose. From my perspective, and having been heavily involved in mentoring in a number of different environments for the last 4 years, I've seen some very positive and been part of some very successful mentoring relationships. I've seen a number that have floundered a little bit, and through a mentoring program I'm involved in around women in technology, we have a group session every fortnight where, as mentors, we talk about and share our experiences and work out how we can try and make that program more insightful. And feedback from other colleagues really sort of strikes an accord with what I'm trying to put across here, is that if there was one thing I would call out as what is the thing that's ultimately going to make a mentoring relationship successful or otherwise, it is your sense of purpose as the mentee. And if you think about what development is about, you think particularly about what mentoring is about, it's a developmental experience. You need to go into it with a reason, and that's what the purpose is all about. And the clearer and the more emotionally attached you are to the reasons you're entering a mentoring relationship will directly impact the positivity and the success of your mentoring relationship. And so as we go through, there's a number of things I'm going to talk about at the front, as it were, of the mentoring life cycle. But I would say for people already in mentoring relationships and people who have had mentoring relationships in the past, I would ask you just to kind of test yourself with a small t and see if you can kind of answer these kind of questions and go through this thought process, because it's always good to kind of reflect. It's always good to recalibrate. And so if you're about to go into a mentoring relationship with purpose, you should quite naturally be able to make a personal statement. You could vocalize it, you could write it down. And your statement would start with, I understand what mentoring is. I've made a conscious decision to enter into a relationship. And your personal statement follows the word because. What's really important for a mentoring relationship to develop and flourish is that as the mentee, you make a conscious decision. You're not press ganged into it. You're not kind of pushed into it. You willingly choose that you're going to enter a mentoring relationship, and it's voluntary, and it's done in understanding what mentoring is and also what mentoring isn't, and you make it with conviction. You're taking positive steps forward. That would be the first test for me, and there's a handout available that talks through all of these themes. So whether you're about to start or whether you're in a relationship, that is a question that you should be able to answer naturally with reflection and with thought, and that's really important. So following that through, we talk about your personal statement, and I really, really recommend that in addition to the thought process behind it, you write it down. I'm going to talk about the significance of writing down goals a little bit later in this call, but bear in mind, it's yours. Therefore, the content is whatever you think the content needs to be, and it's personal to you, and it's always going to be unique. Your personal statement will be unique. So whether you've got an experienced mentor who's done this many times, they will invest time to understand you, recognizing that everybody is different, everyone's journey is different, everyone's motivations are different. And what it really does, it answers a question, simply put, why you want to be mentored. And the benefit of writing it down includes, it's very difficult to write stuff down without thinking. So it's a chance to gather and shape your thoughts. It's a chance to explore your motivations. And ultimately, we'll talk about motivations in terms of goals as well. The extent to which you're motivated will determine, your ongoing commitment to your development, your ongoing commitment to your mentoring relationship. And also, it builds emotional intelligence. Once you start to visualize what the future might look like, and you start to see what changes you might be capable of and what potential you have within you, that builds emotional attachment. And that really is the fuel that takes you on what you might call your development journey. And most importantly, in a mentoring sense, it allows you to better communicate with others. And so when I say others, that could be colleagues, it could be your line manager, it could be family and friends, but specifically in a mentoring relationship, it's really important that you're clear in your own mind and you have the trust and the confidence to articulate not just what your goals are, what you want to achieve, but why it's important to you. And that really is the foundational element for an effective mentor to work with you and help you unlock your potential. And so it's also worth just thinking briefly about, where does our purpose come from? And everyone on this call will have a slightly different take on it because we are individuals, but very much it comes as much from the heart as the head. And so while careful consideration is helpful, and why you and thinking carefully about how you present it and how you take those discussions forward, that's important, some clarity of thinking. But ultimately, it's the extent to which you are emotionally attached to your goals and your direction is the determining factor for how well your mentoring relationship is going to grow and flourish. think about it, as I've said, about an equal kind of focus and emphasis upon personal and professional development, and recognise as well that purpose changes over time. So it might change because you grow and you develop, and let's hope so. It might change because circumstances change, and as I've found out, age 56, it kind of changes because your perspective changes as you go through life. And so it's always good from time to time, this thing called reflection we'll touch on, but just to kind of recheck, what is behind your purpose from a personal perspective. And it will be different as you mature through work and as you mature through life. So really invest time and build emotional attachment. Think from the heart as much as from the head about what is your purpose. So I've kind of majored on that purpose piece a little bit, but that's because it is fundamentally the one thing that will make the difference for you in terms of getting the best out of a mentoring relationship. I'm just going to talk briefly now over 3 pages about mentoring, just to give us the contextual side around what mentoring is to help us have the rest of the discussion. So it's about 3 things broadly. It's about unlocking your potential, and bear in mind here at work, by and large, the emphasis upon you as an individual in your workplace is your performance. Mentoring is different in the sense that mentoring is looking at not what you're doing today, but what you could become. And it has a massive benefit from both a personal and professional developmental perspective. And ultimately, a great kind of visual kind of image is using the word growth. It's about you growing in confidence, growing in experience, growing in stature, achieving more and unlocking your potential. So mentoring broadly, it's a learning and development relationship. The word relationship is really important, and relationships to be able to develop and sustain require trust, require shared values, for example. But mentoring, and this is an important kind of point, because one of the pitfalls people go into with mentoring is an expectation they're going to be kind of told what the answer is and how to do it. That is not the case. Effective mentoring, as with coaching, is what we call non-directive. It is as far away from being told what to do and how to do it as you are going to get in developmental terms. It's about identifying and helping you as the mentee to realize and unlock your potential. The mentor, by and large, is, relatively speaking, more experienced, more knowledgeable, more senior in organizational terms. But broadly, from a mentoring perspective, and this is why mentoring schemes like the APM one work so well, is that you've got a mentee and a mentor from a similar professional background, and the mentor can contextualize the situation you're in and the goals that you have. They understand your environment well enough to give good guidance in a professional sense as well as in terms of a personal development sense. They have some subject matter expertise and insight that may well be helpful to help you shape your thinking and take actions around your development. And a mentor, you should never get a bill from a mentor. It's part of a giving back dynamic, but the one thing I emphasize in the other discussions, particularly where we talk about what it is to be an effective mentor, is that there are massive benefits to the mentor as well, in terms of development, in terms of insight, in terms of all of those kind of stimulating kind of things through social interaction. So bear in mind as you go into a mentoring relationship, or as you're in a mentoring relationship, that the mentor isn't there to do you a favor as such. They're there for their own development as much as the kind of the fulfillment you get from helping somebody else develop their career as well. And then an effective mentor. So this is a thumbnail sketch of what is a longer presentation, but the mentor will listen an awful lot more than they talk. The thinking and the articulation, by and large, is coming from you as the mentee. And a good mentor will listen, and they will ask you what we call good kind of open questions. So questions that don't solicit yes, no answers, questions that make you think. What's great as a mentor is you ask a question and your mentee says, oh, that's a good question. You know, you're getting to the kind of sweet spot of exploration and really starting to think about the art of the possible. And you'll just punctuate the conversations by making sure that you're confirming you understand what's being said, because quite often the communication is beyond just the actual words themselves, and encourage that reflection in your mentee. And where people have the experience and the insight, then most typically they'll apply coaching models and techniques to facilitate the most effective mentoring experience. And they're really there to try and help you find your own answers through creating awareness. The kind of questions that a mentor would ask are trying to make you think and build awareness of yourself and of your situation, such that options start to emerge and you choose options and you commit to taking steps. So sometimes the mentor will take a different kind of persona, as it were, sometimes listening and empathizing, other times feeling that you're developing and therefore they need to stretch you a little bit more by playing more of what you might call a critical friend kind of role. So an effective mentor will adapt to the situation and in light of your development through the relationship. And also what I really do kind of go to town when I talk to people who are getting into mentoring is that sometimes it's really positive not to give all the answers, even though you might know them, encouraging your mentee to go and share an experience with somebody else, go and ask for guidance from somebody else, build their network and venture out and start thinking about how they could engage with other people from a developmental point of view. That's one of the most powerful things that you could do to encourage your mentee and see your mentee doing those kind of things. And then positive mentoring relationships, just to round off with, non-directive, and really, even though the mentor might be seen as being more senior, more experienced, this is a peer relationship. It's not hierarchical. The mentor will encourage you to take action, but you won't get actions, you won't get minutes, you won't get status reports in mentoring. You'll get encouragement and reflection. And so the actual doing piece, coming out of a mentoring discussion and taking action, sits 100% with the mentee. And you get a choice. You can get guidance that you might think not the right thing for you or not the right time. That's fine. It's not a prescriptive kind of process, but it is important that there's a reflection on what you've taken from the mentoring discussions, and you apply that as action in the most appropriate way to help you with your development. And again, that word purpose. So it's a relationship with purpose in a professional kind of context. It's more oriented around your professional kind of goals, but it's still very much based around your personal development as much as your professional development. And in a different discussion around developing project managers that I provide, I draw a distinction between what we mean by professional and personal development. That will appear a little bit later in this discussion, but that's the nature of the mentoring relationship. And ultimately, a relationship requires commitment on both sides. So that's just a little pause there around the emphasis we have to place on purpose for the relationship to be successful, and a little bit of context around mentoring generally and broadly to give us that understanding to take into the rest of the discussion. So from there, what I'd like to do is introduce briefly the concept of the mentoring life cycle. So mentoring isn't prescriptive. It's not like a project where there's certain gates one has to go through. But the concept of a life cycle is really important. And I think particularly one as simple as this, which was based upon some development by two Davids, Clutterbuck and Megginson. And effectively, you've got the beginning, which is establishing rapport. You've got the moving on. And ultimately, the lion's share of your mentoring relationship is cyclical in the sense of setting goals, taking action, achieving, and going in that cyclical fashion of learning and developing. That's the major part of your mentoring relationship. And therefore, it kind of follows that if you get off to a good start, in the same way as if you're delivering a project and in the first 4 weeks post initiation, you're achieving all of the milestones, you're getting all the deliverables kind of produced. If you start well in a project, by and large, the project goes on to be successful. And in the same kind of vein, if you start a mentoring relationship on a positive footing, it has got every chance of growing and nurturing and being effective. And so the mentoring life cycle gives us a bit of structure. You can kind of read it and naturally follow the the flow and see how your mentoring relationship should be developing, the kind of things that should be going on. But mostly, I think it reduces risk. I think it's really important at the front end of the life cycle. And again, for colleagues on the call who are already in a mentoring relationship, I would just test your relationship against the things we're about to talk about and just see whether you need to just sort of go back and loop back round some of the stages. There's no reason why you wouldn't do that. It's beneficial to do it. There's no shame in it. It's always healthy to recalibrate where you are in your mentoring relationship to keep it fresh and keep it growing. So from the previous slide that I was talking about the beginning, establishing rapport, and this is about secure foundations. And so as you would with anybody that you get to meet socially or professionally, you go through a getting to know you kind of period. You're looking at common ground, you're building rapport, and between you, you're trying to ensure you've got a clarity of purpose. So your mentor understands what's important to you, what you're trying to achieve, why that's important, how things that you've tried before might be able to be something to draw from, etc., etc. And also it's about establishing shared values and trust, and broadly what we call in mentoring and kind of coaching terms, chemistry. So sometimes, you know, two people with common interests don't get that rapport, they don't quite get that level of chemistry. And at the start of the relationship, if it's not right, the positive thing is to recognize that, draw a line and try again. It's rare comparatively, but that might be a feature. I think the key thing setting up the relationship is to be clear in your own mind and honest and be able to be candid with your mentor if you think that, you know, the chemistry isn't quite there and you want to try a different tack. But I've emphasized at the bottom here, mitigating risk. So we'll talk about that in 1 second, but the kind of things that are foundational. So we spoke about your personal statement, understanding what mentoring is and isn't, a voluntary decision, a conscious decision with purpose. That's the absolute #1 foundational kind of element to get up and running. As you then get into a mentoring relationship and you go through that first phase with your mentor, what should come out of that are commitment statements and a mentoring agreement. So these are things that are written down, sometimes they're verbalized. So mentoring isn't prescriptive, it's not overly formal in that sense, but I do recommend things are written down for clarity, because it gives more certainty and it takes the ambiguity away and allows you to focus much more on the mentoring element of the discussion rather than how we're going to work together element. So commitment is, as the name implies, it's a statement of commitment from the mentor to the mentee and a state of commitment back from the mentee to the mentor. And the mentoring agreement is something that wraps together the purpose of the mentoring relationship, how you're going to work together, frequency, method, and it just again takes ambiguity out and gives common understanding and allows you to focus on the things that are much more important, which are the developmental elements of getting into that series of mentoring discussions. And when I talk about reducing risk, as you can see from the graph that just emerged, it is absolutely the case that the greatest risk a mentoring relationship faces in terms of whether it's going to be successful or not is at the beginning. And so a failure to really establish rapport, build that common understanding, and put a spark underneath the mentoring relationship at the beginning, that will be damaging, if not terminal. So that's really the most important kind of facet. And the kind of things that we're trying to mitigate, the kind of more typical causes of a failure of a mentoring relationship to get underway positively: misunderstanding of what mentoring is or isn't, unrealistic expectations, lack of purpose. So for example, you know, understanding mentoring and thinking that's quite a good thing, a lot of people are doing it, getting benefit, I should try that. If you can't complete that personal statement in the sense of I want to be mentored because, if you can't make a statement there that's really compelling for you as a mentee, then there's a challenge there. And quite often there's a confusion about what mentoring is and isn't, such that people go into a mentoring relationship expecting to get the kind of direction that they should be getting in the workplace. So we'll talk a little bit about the workplace and mentoring and not blurring those kind of edges, but that's important to kind of understand. So from understanding mentoring from talking about the life cycle. I want to explore some of the critical success factors. And the analogy I always use about development generally is it's a journey. And so you've got to think about mentoring in a sense that your development is at the heart of your mentoring relationship. That's one of the basis of purpose. And so if you're having very positive conversations with your mentor, but it's not developmental, then you've got a network connection, not a mentor, candidly. And so one of the factors around your development journey, other than it's not a quick fix, is that your development requires support or guidance, from colleagues, from your line manager, from friends and family as well, quite often. And mentoring is all about, very specifically, somebody committing time and thought and experience to support your development, with the bonus as the mentor, it's developmental for you as well. And so where you get a mentor and a mentee going into a mentoring relationship where they're both really committed to their own development, they really want to get the maximum benefit out of it that they can, those are the conditions that you'll most have a successful mentoring relationship. And then before you begin, so this is about, before you enter that life cycle, there are two, and I'm going to use the phrase gates with very small g. So these aren't formal kind of gates, but these are things that you should be able to think through in your own mind as a mentee and say, I am ready. And so the beginning part is exploration. And so webinars like this, there's some handouts from the previous sessions as well as this one, but exploring what mentoring is, having realistic expectations, understanding it's a relationship, and therefore there's a period of getting to know each other, there's a period of building rapport, knowing it's not a quick fix, and recognizing how it adds to the workplace rather than replaces it. That is a great investment. And that is all about making sure that not only is mentoring right for you, it's right for you right now. And then from there, what we move on to is, so you've gone through the, I'm going to begin my journey into mentoring, and we're now at a stage where we're thinking about how you then start. And so the two things that you most need to be clear on is purpose again. And all of these things are kind of things you could transpose as a question and ask yourself, and things you could then answer back, either verbally in your own mind or by committing to paper. And I strongly recommend committing to paper. But purpose comes from, or purpose is expressed as and visible as, you generally want to be mentored. You see the value in it, and you can articulate why, and you can explain how you think that's going to benefit you, and you can talk about what success looks like to you. And these are all the things that start to become quite emotional and build that attachment. And moreover, you can talk about direction. So purpose is all about the why is this important? The direction is all about where's this going to take me? It's about kind of goals broadly. And so with your development being a journey, if you don't make conscious decisions and you don't take tangible steps, you're a hostage to fortune more than you're driving your own development. And so the before you start is all about purpose and direction. Being ready to say, right, I'm now going to go and sit down with my my mentor for the first time, establish some kind of chemistry, and I'm going to start to reap the benefits of being mentored. And this is your personal statement, and this is about you being clear about where you're trying to get to in terms of destination and goals. And we'll talk about goals in a second. And then the secure foundations, ultimately, as you start engaging with your mentor for the first time, all of that homework and all of that thought process, and it's much more about thought than effort, comes to a foundation for which you can launch directly into a positive set of conversations and build that effective mentoring relationship from day one. So goals, hot on the heels of that. So this is a brief snapshot around a wider piece of goal setting, but I think it sets a flavor for people in mentoring relationships or thinking about mentoring relationships. And this is a really important set of statistics I wanted to share with you, based on not my experience, but based on academic study. So people who set themselves goals, so it could be on a personal level, somebody says, actually, I want to do the the 3 Peaks Challenge, or I want to run a marathon, or something personal. Equally, people, as we have on this webinar today, people want to develop, people want developmental kind of goals. So when you actually write your goals down, as opposed to just keep them in your head, statistically, you are 40% more likely to achieve those goals. And that comes from the emotional attachment. That comes through, writing them down brings that clarity of purpose. As you understand things better, you're more likely to get there. As you understand things better, you'll be emotionally attached. When you share your goals with someone, i.e. a mentor, then that probability is 70%. So that's a really important statistic for you to think about. And this is why I emphasize and will continue to emphasize during the course of this discussion about writing things down. It really does help the thought process. It builds emotional attachment. It builds clarity. And so when you're thinking about your goals, the major thing I would guide you on is just completely ignore how. It doesn't matter at this point. In fact, it's a little bit prohibitive, because I think by and large, when you start to think about goals and you start to subliminally or consciously explore the how, we become preconditioned to rule things out because we think it's not achievable. Where in reality, the benefit of things like mentoring and the benefit of things that you get at work around training and coaching and experience make things that today might be difficult into exactly what you're doing tomorrow. And this is all about the potential within you. And we all have potential much greater than the reality that we've experienced today. So our performance at work today is not 100% of what we're capable of. That potential can be unlocked, and mentoring is one of the great ways to do that. And so just think about where you want to get to, and don't worry about the how. And part of the mentoring relationship and part of mentoring generally is helping you explore that journey and map that journey out and take that journey. And you don't always have to be precise. So sometimes being precise doesn't really matter, because you can always change your mind. You just got to have enough clarity in your own mind so you know what steps you are taking are going towards your destination. So you take steps with intent. So I don't know kind of what the journey looks like to completion, but I know if I do X, Y, and Z, I'm moving forwards. And development really is all about moving forwards, and people's pace will be different, people's opportunities will be different. But if every day you know you're taking some steps that take you forwards, that will drive fulfillment, and that will keep you on your journey. That will keep you motivated. That will keep you positive on your journey. So really explore goals as best you can, but don't be hung up on, I can't see it that clearly. That doesn't matter. Direction is as good as it needs to be. And please generally don't explore the how. That will follow. Just think without limits. And obviously write them down and tell people about them. In this instance, tell your mentor, be prepared to explain why. So whilst knowing your destination is really important, what is even more important is understanding why. This is about your motivations. And again, this is all about emotional attachment. So the more you explore the goals, the more you become attached, the more you visualize what a future state might look like. But also, again, it's getting your thinking straight. And sometimes exploring your goals in terms of motivations might lead you to conclude, actually, you're not quite that passionate after all. And maybe there's a better avenue to explore. And the key in a mentoring relationship is it helps you express your thoughts to your mentor. And the more your mentor understands you, the more avenues open up that they can help you explore and help you develop. And so the kind of questions you might want to ask yourself are appearing here on the screen, and you can tell they're all a bit what we might call kind of touchy-feely. They're not kind of, I've done X by Y. You're asking, why is it important? What would it look like? These are things where you mentally visualize, what's it going to do by way of benefit? How's it going to benefit other people? What are the things they're going to be doing? You start to think about any compromises you might have to make. So, you might want a big promotion. That might mean working away from home, and that might mean a compromise on work-life balance, for example. But also what's really important, those two things in the bottom left, is if you are going to change, if you're going to engineer a different set of circumstances, if you're going to develop and start doing different things, you will have to change on that journey as well. And it helps you understand the nature of the changes you might need to go through. That'll help your mentor help you understand the steps that you might take on your journey. So yeah, it's really important that you're clear on your motivations, much more than you're clear on your goals, is the summary. So from there then, reflection. There's just one page around reflection, and that's really important to recognize that as you're looking at starting a mentoring relationship, as you're looking at going into your next mentoring discussion, at any point in time, you're not starting from where you are today. You're starting the next chapter, is all that's happening. And the benefit of reflection is you look at what you have become to get to this point, rather than you're always focused on where you're trying to get to from where you are now. And when you think about growing up through your younger days, your formative years, school, college, university, work, wherever you may be life-wise, think about all the experience you've amassed. Think about the achievements you've made. Think about the learning you've had, connections you've made, all of those things. And also think about people that you've interacted with, challenges that you've overcome. We've all gone through a journey in life of whatever duration, of whatever kind of nature. All of those experiences are never wasted. They're always going to be something at some point you'll lean on, either to help solve a challenge or to help you through a period of uncertainty. So periodically, I strongly recommend a short time of reflection, just to really think about what you've become on this journey, and not just worry about how you move from where you are now to a future state. Reflection's really important. Moreover, it's very beneficial. It's one of those things that I think helps you get to know yourself better, and helps you to kind of take away some of the shackles you might think exist around, achieving your goals. So getting close to the end then, so on your journey, the things that I would really recommend, I touched on this before, is recognizing that mentoring is an integral part of your personal and professional development. Professional development broadly is what you do at work. It's what you do as a living. It's how you do it. It's all of those kind of things. Your personal development is about your well-being. It's about your values. It's about your purpose. It's about relationships at the heart of it. So you can see that Venn diagram kind of effect. Things that really bind together your personal and professional development is you in your own self, in terms of your values, in terms of your moral compass, in terms of your motivations. And it's about the skills that you have to build and nurture relationships, which in a very simple term is what leads to leadership. So there's a real correlation between the skills that mentors and coaches have to develop and the skills that leaders have to develop. It's very leadership kind of oriented. But for the purpose of this discussion, really the guidance is keep a focus, an equal balance on personal and professional development, and recognize that mentoring is all about your development. That's the sole purpose of the mentoring relationship, whilst it also delivers some real benefits around well-being. It reduces stress, it builds confidence, all those other good things. And so making time and space. So we know unprecedented times during the pandemic, and generally professional life is busy for most people. It tends to be quite intense for project managers. So recognize that work's going to be demanding, life's going to get in the way, and just work hard periodically to make some time for you. Just, move away from thinking about work and what tomorrow is going to bring and deadlines, and just take some quiet time, maybe 15 minutes over coffee every now and then. Just take time to think about you, reflect on where you're at, explore your future. Don't get sucked into the detail day in, day out about your work, which is very kind of this week, next week by nature in many cases. Don't blur the edges with your professional life. It's really important. So there's real value developmentally in your workplace. What we do with mentoring is we add to it, not replace what you get in the workplace, and not try and fix things you're not getting in your workplace. You can learn and develop massively through colleagues, through role modeling, through shadowing, through training. But in work, people are trying to enhance your performance now, and your performance management process tends to be appraisal. What did you do last year? Objectives, what are you going to do this year? Very narrow focus time-wise. Where your mentor will focus on your potential. There won't be time limits on how far your development looks or how far away your goals might be. And they're not telling you what to do or how to do it. They're fundamentally not doing that. And if they do, they shouldn't be. They're there to help you explore, understand the options, and make some choices and take some action. And escaping from the workplace, as it were, is quite cathartic, and it's quite beneficial. This is why mentoring has some good benefits about well-being. Really, is what you think about in a mentoring relationship is very different to what you think about in the workplace. You focus more on yourself, which is always good, you know, and it relieves stress because you're not under intense pressure to do things in a certain way by certain timescales. You're exploring your potential. You're exploring what your future might look like. You're thinking about outcomes you really want to get to. It's beneficial to you. And you will, through your development generally and your efforts and your thought process and your potential, you'll get successes. Through mentoring, hopefully you'll get more successes. And it's important that you do take a time to recognize and celebrate your successes. A little bit of an overlay with reflection here. You know, every time you achieve something, you've got a good chance to look back and think, 6 weeks ago, 6 months ago, for example, I didn't think this was possible. And that's the thing that builds momentum. And momentum's a fantastic thing in development. It's a great thing in life. Once you start to see results, you know, you start to get that spiral effect where, you know, you're building momentum, you're moving quicker, you're moving faster, more purpose, and confidence grows. At which point, it's sensible to recalibrate your goals. You're capable of more. Every success is growth and development. You're capable of more. So recalibrate and reset as a consequence, but take the time to celebrate and reflect. This last piece is just a little kind of summary of a coaching model known as GROW. And that's an acronym for GROW. And it's a cyclical model, as you can see. So G is around the goal. And this coaching model starts with, what is your goal? And then the R is about your current reality. So where are you now? Options is the O, will to act is a W. So broadly, as you cycle around, and this can be applied at a macro level to your mentoring relationship, it can be applied in more detail for every mentoring discussion that you have, starting with, what are we trying to achieve today? Well, where are you with that? What have you tried before? What options do you think you've got? What are you going to do? Out of those options, what are you going to do now? And so your mentor will be trying to kind of guide you in that fashion through a discussion. And these are the kind of open questions that you might expect, where they're trying to engender that sense of purpose. But moreover, they're trying to feed off your sense of purpose, trying to build your momentum through understanding what your purpose is and your motivations are, you know, and set those actions in the context of beneficial steps towards your goals. So a little bit of insight in terms of how that looks and how that mentoring discussion may work. And I'd encourage you to Google the GROW model. You'll get a lot of stuff back. It's very well established. It's quite easy to contextualize. It's quite easy to apply. It kind of makes sense intuitively. That'd be a good thing for you to look at. And so ultimately, we're now at the end. We're going to do the final two mentees, if we could please, Sarah, and sweep up. I don't know if there's been any questions through the chat window.
Yeah, thank you, Richard. There's been some questions that you sort of answered a couple on your way, but there's just a couple I thought I'd highlight now before I move on to that next mentee for you. And Ashok very kindly contributed some sharing with his experience, but also a question is around, is the mentor a teacher or an equal partner providing advice? And sort of a statement at the end to say difficult to be both. I know you sort of talked about that, but if you wanted to elaborate on that at all a little bit.
Yeah, so two things really. Definitely not a teacher. So if you remember your school days, and I can barely remember mine, but literally the teacher would dictate, this is what you need to know. Yeah, and so mentoring is the polar opposite. Teaching is very directive, mentoring is non-directive. And so your mentor is more a guide and a facilitator. In terms of the relationship, you are peers. Yeah, and I covered that in one of the previous kind of slides. And so there's no hierarchy in a mentoring relationship, whilst the mentor typically has more experience and more insight and maybe more senior. It's an equal relationship between peers. The benefits are slightly different in each case, but it has to be mutually beneficial for that mentor relationship to be successful.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that, for expanding on that a little bit. A couple more questions coming in. I have moved the mentee question on, so those that are able to start contributing to that, and I'll share my screen shortly so we can see the responses. But a question here from Brenda. What advice would you give to a mentor who has a mentee who really requires coaching rather than mentoring?
I would tell them. So I think that's a great question, and you know, for a lot of people, I think the distinction between coaching and mentoring is a little bit blurred, and quite often that's because people use the terms interchangeably. And when I did the effective mentor discussion, I touched on this point, and I think the role of the mentor should be to make sure through those early discussions at the beginning that mentoring is the most appropriate learning solution for the mentee. And in the event, as Brenda asks, you know, you look at it as a mentor and you think, actually, I think a better learning option for you is coaching. I think you need to say that, and to the extent you can, help your mentee to explore options to find a coach.
Yep, perfect. Thank you. Just a couple more are coming in. Is there advice on closing a mentor relationship? How to bring that to a conclusion?
Yes. So I think the most important thing in any relationship at any time is to be open and be honest. And in the majority of cases, when a mentoring relationship comes towards an end, that's because of achievement, i.e. the mentee came into the relationship thinking, I have these goals, I want to achieve these kind of things. The fact that you're talking about the end of the relationship is usually because those things have been achieved. It's a positive. And so I think, you know, being open and being candid, and at any point during a relationship, I think you always need to keep a little test of, you know, how beneficial is this on both sides, and be prepared to say, actually, I think I could get more out of it, or I think we need to change this, or actually, I think I've got to where I need to be. Thank you, and move on. And that should be professional, if you know what I mean, in terms of it's not an emotional discussion, it's objective, and be candid. And then having recognised that you know, for the mentee, they've achieved what they set out to achieve, I think the best thing the mentor could do at that point is help them think through their options, how they move forward, and what they do next in terms of learning and development. And for the mentee, I would say, you know, always offer some kind of thanks and feedback to the mentor, because they want to grow and they want to develop. But mentoring relationships, whilst they could go on for years, they will come to an end sooner or later, and it's much better they come to a natural end based on achievement rather than they fizzle out.
I mean, as you say, it will come to a natural end, and more often than not, and hopefully it's always in a celebration, as in they've achieved something, they've developed. But I'm just wondering whether there's some advice on, if you're recognising as the mentor that perhaps you're not the right fit for their needs, and how you would perhaps sort of close a mentoring relationship because of that, rather than they've come to the end of their development.
I would
challenged with you.
Yeah, I would always try and steer the mentee towards their decision to close. But yeah, by and large, in mentoring, you're asking open questions and pertinent questions in light of the circumstances. And what I would do, so I went back to the very beginning about purpose and the commitment statement. So I will quite often, when I've had a mentoring relationship last for more than 3 months or so, is every 3 months or so, look to recalibrate and say, I'd really like you to think about your goals and think about where you're mentoring, and recalibrate your personal statement.
Yeah.
Maybe not write it down at that point, but just, you know, you can just come back next session and tell me about, you know, why is mentoring important to you now? How have your goals changed through our relationship, and how do you see things now? And they may well just re-energize through that process, or they may say, actually, I think I'm coming to a natural end. But I would try and not put the onus on the mentee, but try and, through open questions and thought process, ask the mentee to explore if there's more that you can get out of the mentoring relationship.
Yeah, good advice, good advice. There's just 2 more questions which perhaps we can get to quickly before we just touch on those last 2 mentoring polls. One question is, you know, highlighting obviously that mentoring is voluntary, and it's great that so many people are doing that with APM. Is it hard to find mentors who are really interested in mentees' growth? How can we overcome this situation? What is the benefit for mentors? Is it something around highlighting the benefits of the mentor that will help with that?
Well, so there's a whole presentation on the benefits to the mentor, but I would summarize and say, from personal experience, my personal development has been most positively impacted over the last 4 years through being a mentor. And the reason for that, very simply, is that it builds your own self-awareness. When you've got to be in a position where you're listening, trying to understand, you much better naturally then start to empathize. You learn active listening, and you become much more effective generally in relationships, whether it's at home, whether it's in a professional sense. So please don't underestimate how developmental and how stimulating it is for mentors to be mentors.
Yeah, absolutely. And one last question, and then I'll start to share my screen for everyone and yourself, Richard, is what do you do if some of the key aspects of mentor relationships lost, e.g. trust?
Well, I think it's difficult to come back from trust. And again, it's a little bit abstract, so I don't know kind of what the circumstances might be, but I think in a relationship, whether it's mentoring or whether it's professional, if trust is lost, it has to try and be rebuilt. But for a mentoring relationship, it might be it's re-established as part of closing that mentoring relationship. It really does depend on the circumstances, but it's very difficult to have an effective mentoring relationship if there isn't trust on both sides.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully you never get to that point, like you say, losing the trust, because that's difficult to come back from.
Whilst that's coming in, Sarah, let me just say, in the handout, How to Make Your Mentoring Relationship Work for You, PDF document, there's some contact details at the back. And so if people did want to pick up on any specific points, please do feel free to link in with me, or if you're linked in already, ping me a message. But it's good to see that there's some value come out of it for the folk who've completed the Mentee.
Yeah, thank you those who are contributing through Mentee for us. So just moving on to the last poll really for today. Really talking about sort of how you're feeling now towards being mentored, and whether there's been some changes in your feeling for that.
Just while this is late, so there's been some really good questions there, by the way. I really appreciate that. Some quite insightful questions as well. So.
Thank you very much for everyone's attention and questions today. As Richard said, they were really helpful. But otherwise, I think we've come to a natural end, and I think we're pretty much on time, just a couple of minutes over. So thank you for hanging on in there, those of you that are still with us. And thank you, Richard, for your time today. If you've got any closing remarks you just wanted to make, or are you happy?
Just wanted to thank you, Sarah, for facilitating. Thank all of the colleagues who've attended. Thank you very much for your time and your engagement. Very much appreciated. And hopefully the world of mentoring will open up for everybody and be a positive development experience, as it has been for me for the last 30 years or so.
Yeah, and if anyone is interested in becoming a mentor, or indeed wanting to be mentored via the APM mentoring program, then you can find all that information on our website. If you just go onto our website and search mentoring program, you'll get to the right page. It provides you with some details, mentoring program guide, and then a link as to how you can get involved, which is all made available on our APM community for our members. So thank you, or of course please do contact me if you've got any questions that you think I can help you with. So thank you everyone, enjoy the rest of your afternoon. We'll see you soon. Thank you, Richard, take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.